Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Tonight's program will address the question, what are your rights? What does the city of New York insist you're entitled to simply because you're a human being? As we well know, people are discriminated in employment, in housing, and lending practices. They're profiled by law enforcement. You can stand there and bang your fist on the corner of the deli and say, I know my rights. But what are those rights? Tonight we're joined by the New York City Commissioner of Human Rights, someone who you know well because she served in the City Council in the Bronx for many years. Please join me in welcoming back to Bronx Talk, the New York City Commissioner on Human Rights, Commissioner Anabel Palma. Nice to see you, Commissioner.
Nice to see you. Good evening, Gary, and good evening to all.
It's lovely to have you back. Let's just talk a little bit about you. People will say, wait a minute, wasn't she in District 18? Let's see, you were in the City Council for 14 years,
14
which
years.
is not a small amount. What some people don't know, and I really forgot about this, I knew it way back when, is that you were an organizer for 1199.
That's correct.
Which is where you first worked on human rights, and in 2021 you were appointed commissioner for the Commission on Human Rights. How did that 1199 experience lay the foundation for what you do now, inform your vision of what the right thing that should be done with people?
Sure. Thank you, Gary, for having me on your show in my capacity as Commissioner of Human Rights. And actually, walking in the campus today, I got to see a glimpse.
We should say Lehman College campus,
yes,
because that's where BronxNet studios are.
Lehman College campus, which is doing the ribbon cutting for nursing. And as you know, I come from the Healthcare Workers Union, which laid the foundation, as you mentioned, for where I am today, through what I learned at 1199, right, through the organizing, not only of workers' rights, health and safety for the workers, but also getting involved in how politics plays a big role in our lives, right? Going up to Albany and ensuring that whoever was in office at that time, the legislature and the governor provided the correct funding and the appropriate funding to continue to run our hospitals and our nursing homes, meant that besides having a place to work in, we needed protections as well. And so through 1199, I learned the art of organizing, negotiating, and also just bringing people together to educate them around their rights.
I'm just smiling because, you explained it very well to me. It comes down to what is justice, what is right from wrong, what do people deserve. I'm sure you're aware the nurses union kind of won a pretty serious battle with some of the healthcare providers here. COVID played a part of this. Let's say you were part of the test and trace services for the city. What did you see during that period of time about how many Bronx communities, many marginalized, how they did during COVID, and what did that inspire you to think about as you got into this position? So
during the pandemic, what I saw in our own backyard here in the Bronx was we were not getting tests quick enough. We were not getting access to hand sanitizers. We were not getting access to the appropriate
masks
PPE.
And all that. But is that we were not getting like nobody was getting, or we were not getting because I hate to think that the Bronx was getting less or was in worse shape than other places?
It's not that no one was getting, it's that the historical marginalized communities were not getting what they deserve, what every other community had access to. The marginalized communities were, it was trickling in. They weren't getting it fast enough. So we saw the rates in certain communities of people dying of COVID-19, of people not being able to get the proper PPE, and people not being able to get vaccines at a rate when the vaccines came out at the rate that other communities were getting.
Just thinking about that. So from a technically, if you were managing that system, you would say, well, where are the spikes? Where is it most serious? Where is the need greatest? When we know that our populations were the first hit during COVID, and then you would say, well, then let's apportion the resources in that fashion. Your suggestion is that that's not really what happened?
Well, it wasn't happening in the beginning.
In the beginning.
Into the program of Test and Trace was created. And it was created for that purpose.
That purpose.
To ensure that communities who did not have access to certain benefits got those access.
Right. And, I guess that's part of the metaphor that I raised earlier. Somebody had to bang their fist on
Yes.
the counter of the deli and say, I know my rights. And it's something we deserve. Let's talk about the New York City Commission on Human
Sure.
Rights. For people who don't know, this is the city agency that helps individuals understand their rights and obligations under city human rights law. What do you think people need to know that they don't know? And then if you can give examples as well, we'll go through some of that. And then I'd really like to talk about, well, what happens, and if you think that, wait a minute, this, I know my rights. So what's your vision of what the office needs to do?
Thank you, Gary. I think what New Yorkers need to know, first and foremost, New Yorkers and Bronx residents, right? We're talking to Bronx residents today, is that the New York City on Human Rights is here to protect their rights, right? The New York City Human Rights Law is here for New Yorkers. And we have in the agency a dual mandate. We enforce the human rights law, and we also have a mandate to educate and foster relationships among communities. When we talk about the human rights law and the rights under the human rights law, it's the rights in employment, public accommodation, and housing. And so for anyone who has faced discrimination in employment, anyone who has faced discrimination in housing, or anyone who has faced discrimination in a public accommodation can call the Human Rights Commission and let us know if you've been discriminated against, whether that's through a disability, being denied housing, or
any number of other things. I think we took a page out of your website, which we can put up, which lists all the things while we talk about it, so people can see exactly what's involved. Do you then work with lawyers or the court system to say, well, okay, so such and such a company is not doing the right thing? Here's a person who claims that something has happened.
Gary, we don't outsource our work. The beauty of the Commission on Human Rights here in New York City is that we do all of our work.
You have the staff to handle those things.
We have staff, we have a team, we have a mandate under the charter to do this work, to enforce the human rights law. And so when anyone calls into our commission, we take their inquiry, we assess the inquiry. If the inquiry falls within our jurisdiction, we then, if it becomes a complaint, we do the investigation. We have a law enforcement bureau, which is led by our Deputy Commissioner of Law Enforcement, and under her leadership, there's a team of lawyers, there's a team of interventionists.
That's what I was waiting to hear.
There's a team of info line workers. There's a team of administrative workers that does the work to ensure.
Let's talk some examples then. Let's say in employment. Give, if you could, obviously don't say names, but you say, what have you seen that is of concern or that would define a trend for the people in the Bronx to say, well, wait a minute, that's happening to me. Just give us an example. We'll run down the list a little bit.
Sure. So an example of discrimination in employment, you go to do an interview and you're asked to give your criminal history before you are made a conditional offer. That is against the human rights law. That is against our laws to protect the class.
So let's just use that. So if you hear that was done, then you go back to the company. Do they get sued? Do they get a slap on the hand? Do you take them to court? Or it depends how serious the situation. I mean, I'm just curious how it ultimately plays out. And I think people would like to know,
Sure.
am I going to get something out of it?
So every situation is serious. No one is getting a slap on the wrist. What we want to do is to ensure that we root out discrimination. And so when we hear of something like that, the inquiry comes in, a complaint is filed, we then follow up with the company. We do a thorough investigation. Our attorneys do a thorough investigation of the complaint that was filed. And if we have the facts that lead to a case, then we pursue it. We'll do most of the time we'll do settlements, because at the most of the times an individual who has faced this harm wants the discrimination to stop. We are able to get damages for that individual as well as civil penalties for the city. But besides that, we're also then getting the opportunity to educate that employer not to continue to do this behavior, to change the culture.
And it probably puts an underline under who they are, and then you can follow up.
Yes.
You know, everybody who gets a job now, certainly I know I've done it here for BronxNet, for example, we need to take a course in sexual harassment training.
Correct.
To me, that is very helpful for people who said, gee, I had no idea that was the case. These are the kinds of things I'm presumably you'd like to see as much of as possible.
So these are
to inform the public and, of course, the employer.
Correct. Well. We want the public to know how their rights are protected. We also do a series of trainings through our agency, sexual harassment trainings. Our policy team now is working on enhancing some of our sexual harassment language to be able to update the sexual harassment trainings. But yes, this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about if you are in a situation in your job where you feel you've been discriminated against, whether it's being denied of reasonable accommodation because you are an expectant mother, or someone returning back from a disability, or an individual who needs a reasonable accommodation for religious reasons. We need to hear about these instances so we can follow up and let you know how we can protect you.
You know, you've suggested this in each one of the examples you gave. Talk about protected classes. There are some very defined protected classes. Now, it may vary from industry to industry, from housing to employment or whatever. But talk about protected classes so that people would know, gee, do I have a case, or was this really improper or not?
So right now, if you go to our website, we are now, our law continues to get amended. We have over 25 protected categories, right? Religion, gender, age. Those are examples of protected categories. And
so if you fall within those, then certainly if there's something you think is not appropriate, you should reach out.
Correct. And the rest of the ones that I didn't mention, but the newest ones being height and weight now is one of our newest protected categories.
Oh, yes, that was recent legislation,
yes.
Right? Very recent, right? So that somebody can't say you look a certain way.
Correct.
Because
and be denied a job.
Let's talk about housing, because
Yes.
people are manipulated in housing in many different ways.
Correct.
They manipulate neighborhoods, they manipulate the development, they do all those kinds of things. What do you see in housing that is of concern, or that people should be aware about?
So I think, for New Yorkers, and especially here in the Bronx, right, we know that there is a huge issue of affordable housing. And what we see mostly...
You're not the first person to have said that.
Our mayor now has put out a robust plan to deal with affordable housing. And so it's an issue that I know is important to him, and it aligns with the work that we do. And so what we're seeing in affordable housing is definitely people being either displaced or denied housing because of their income status, right? And so source of income is a huge issue that we deal with, which, source of income means how are you going to pay for your rental unit, right? And we have a lot of people who depend on subsidies to pay for their rental unit, and we see landlords turning them away because
not because they don't have the money, but because they don't like the source of it.
Correct, because they don't like they don't want to accept a voucher because that individual they feel it's, they're not going to get the
attach
appropriate
that to the type of person whom it might be.
Correct.
I want to ask you about this, the whole notion of profiling by law enforcement. And we were talking before about the former borough president, Ruben Diaz Jr. He told us on the program at one point, he was an assembly member at the time, and he was pulled over, and it was really disrespectful. Of course, Yusef Salam was very recently pulled over. What are the concerns there? What happens that's inappropriate? How do you view that? And of course, it's been in the news because of the override of the mayor's bill.
Sure. For us at the commission, like I stated earlier, Gary, our goal is to work to root out discrimination at its core, right? To work with community partners, to work with sibling agencies to ensure that people are educated on their rights, and those who are providing a service knows what their obligations and responsibilities are. And I know for my agency, it's important to work with my my sibling agencies, right? So this summer, I would tell you, this past summer, for the first time, we were able to partner and collaborate with NYPD and do trainings to NYPD officers who are currently on the job, but also be invited to go to the academy and do trainings for those officers who were going to come on the job, right? So we partnered up with the EEO officer, and we did a series of trainings around our anti-Black racism training that we have, that we currently do at the commission, as well as sexual harassment. And we also partnered up with DOE and did some training for the for their school safety officers as well.
I mentioned the notion of trainings before. I think that's very helpful. I think that's we always try to be preventative with problems and beforehand rather than after the effect. The economic abuse has been included in the definition of domestic violence in the city human rights law. Define how that works. How does that play? Obviously, DV is a big issue here in the Bronx and everywhere. How does that play? What are the mechanics of something that would be considered abuse in that framework? So
someone who is unfortunately, in a situation that I was in when I was younger, right? In a domestic abuse situation where you don't have access to your own economic resources. So anyone who would prevent if prevent you from having access to your economic financials.
And then, so you've seen cases like that? I mean, this has come up and people have come in? Because it sounds like a woman in that circumstance, and I realize that for you it was a long time ago, but they may not feel empowered that, wait a minute, I deserve or I'm entitled to this information.
And that's correct, right? And, many individuals who are in a domestic violence situation may not see, right, economic abuse as being part of the abuse that's going on. I will tell you that if any inquiries have come in, if they will come in through our law enforcement bureau, I will not see those firsthand, and only because I'm the last adjudicator for cases, and so I have to
as long as you have people who work for you. Of course, the best leadership is people who hire the best people, and that's how you find a great leader. I wanted to ask you about this. On Election Day in 2022, New York City voters approved the 3 ballot measures meant to alleviate impacts of structural racism on New Yorkers of color and create a more equal city through equitable city services. This was through the Racial Justice Commission. Does that duplicate something? Does that give you an extra tool? Where are we at? And mostly just to tell voters, you voted for it. this is what you're getting,
Right.
and this is how the Commissioner of Human Rights views it.
And so what it did, it create, right, it falls under the Mayor's Office of Equity, and so now it's the Mayor's Office of Equity and Racial Justice. What it does is gives us the ability to work with the Mayor's Office of Equity and Racial Justice and pull our resources together, right? We're the law enforcement agency, and so through the work that they do in terms of outreach and education in the community, we become their partner. Last night we were at PS 75 on Fayette Street doing a community engagement forum for the community to get feedback from the community in terms of developing a plan of what the community feels their most pressing needs are, and how this office, the Mayor's Office of Equity and Justice, can develop, right, and bring resources to them. I was asked to be co-chair alongside with my colleague Adolfo Carrion, right, to lead these conversations. And so this is what happens when voters vote for something like that, right? You just get to pull resources together from the agencies.
You see that as the best part of,
Yes.
Of some of the democratic systems. But I guess it grows your effort, right?
It does.
In other words, it gives you maybe more teeth. You want to do more trainings. Now you have another agency doing
Correct.
it. To me, it's an indication, number one, the voters get the credit for it, the ultimate credit for it, but that the city sees this as an issue that should be addressed on a large
Absolutely, and we get to reach more New Yorkers, right? We get to educate more New Yorkers, and our efforts go further.
You know, when you said that, I smiled because obviously I've chosen to live in the Bronx and New York City. It makes me proud of our city. If you look at what's going on across the country, and you know, where was it, in Kansas, they cut down a Jackie Robinson statue. I mean, you can't imagine anything more abominable. But in New York, we value these things. I mean, to me, this is one of the largest statements. How are we doing? Give us a grade. I mean, are you like, oh my goodness, there's 40 million cases coming in, everybody's got a reasonable complaint? Or do you feel like some advancements are being made in the efforts to do this?
You know, Gary, no matter how many complaints come in, I feel that advancements are being made. And I say that because when I look at our source of income cases that come in, right, we get to do we don't have to wait to take it to a trial, but we get to do what we call pre-complaint intervention, which means we get to quickly work with that landlord, resolve an issue for an individual.
And the tenant, I must say. I'm sure that's vital to people in the Bronx.
Resolve an issue for that tenant who needs that housing unit at the moment. But through that negotiation and that pre-complaint interventions, we also have been able to achieve set-asides of other apartments for tenants coming behind them. And so that for me is the beauty of the work that we do that gets us to the progress that we need. I just don't need to house this individual. I need to house other individuals who have vouchers and are coming behind them.
Let's just take a step back for you. And people can pretty well see that this has been a matter of passion for you. You have real passion for fairness and justice.
Yes.
And you mentioned your own situation. You were been a single mom. I guess it gives you certainly a greater sense of identification with many of the people who pick up the phone and call.
Absolutely. You know me now for several years. I'm
counting, but yeah.
I think the first time we met, I was born and raised in the Bronx, Lincoln Hospital. That's, this is who I am. I am part of the Bronx. The Bronx is part of me. And
even though you do serve Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and
well, now I'm a citywide girl.
No,
but at
we
the end,
brought her here in her hometown, so we get the advantage.
Yes, at the end of the day, I get to still be a Bronx girl. The issues that I am fighting for and continue to ensure that my team fights for passionately every single day are the issues that I grew up with. I grew up with landlords not making the right repairs to the building that I was growing up in. I grew up with landlords abandoning the building that my mom and my brothers and our neighbors lived in just because they could walk away from a building and leave families who had less than in a situation that was not adequate. And I don't want that for the people that I represent.
People. So it gives you a sense of identity and a sense of who they are. Let's just review then. Okay, so now I saw the commissioner on Bronx Talk. I've gotten the idea that maybe I'm entitled to something because something that didn't sound kosher happened. Pick up the phone. What do you do? Call somebody?
You pick up the phone. You could call 311.
You could call somebody.
You can actually call 311 and say human rights, and you will be connected directly to our office. Or you can pick up the phone and call 212-416-0917. And you will be connected directly to our agency.
Human beings will pick up the phone?
Human beings will pick.
My fingers will cross when I ask that blindly.
Human beings, and I say this with great pride, because before I came to the commission, we were not doing live calls, which I found was not the right way to ensure that people were being protected.
You got a problem in your domestic violence situation. The last thing you want is starting to push buttons. Number 2, number 6.
So now you can call our offices, and you will have a menu of languages. And
that's helpful too.
And you will get to speak to someone in your own language and be able to file your complaint.
Let's just wrap it up with kind of like something else. What's next? What would you like to see? Is there another class that we need, or some other designation, or another area that you'd like to see some energy put toward? Or do you think you're doing what needs to be done?
I think we are doing the work that we have been charged to do. The city council sort of determines what other class.
That's fair. You know what? So here's the advice to everybody: don't let council member, don't let Commissioner Palma walk around the streets, because she's going to come up with stuff that you're going to have to deal with. Right? Is that fair?
The council members usually come up with what we should be doing.
Okay, fine. Listen, Commissioner Anabel Palma, thank you so much for joining us. Talking about fairness and justice and human rights in this day and age, we don't do enough of it, and we're thrilled that you came over here to the Bronx to do it. And we want to thank everybody involved. Thanks to our producer, Rebecca Hemick, our director, Will Guzman. We have a cast of thousands working around the studio with us. And, of course, to you, too, the people of the Bronx. You make it all worthwhile. So, if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, we'll be back next week.
Thank you.